My name is Michael, and I'm 38 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've been passionate about programming. It's more than just a job to me, it's a calling, something that I have dedicated a large portion of my life to mastering. I've been working as a programmer at my current company for many years now, and during that time, I've grown to love the work I do. There's a unique satisfaction that comes from solving complex problems, writing clean code, and seeing a project come together from start to finish. Each day, I find fulfillment in the challenges that programming presents, and I wake up excited to tackle whatever new problem comes my way. When I first started here, I faced a lot of challenges. The pressure was intense, and there were times when I questioned whether I was cut out for this career. I struggled with anxiety, constantly doubting my abilities and worrying about whether I was doing a good enough job. But as the years passed, I gradually overcame those fears. I worked hard to improve my skills, learned from my mistakes, and gained confidence in my abilities. Now, I am proud of the work I do and the programmer I have become. I often tell the younger folks at work that sticking with one thing for a long time is important. It allows you to develop a deep understanding and expertise, something that only comes with experience and dedication. At this point in my life, I'm content with where I am. I enjoy my work, and I'm happy to continue doing what I love every day. I know there might be opportunities to move up the ladder or perhaps even offers from other companies, but honestly, those aren't my main concerns. I'm already 38 years old, and sometimes it feels like I'll be at this company forever. I've built a life here, and I doubt there's much chance for further career advancement. I've made peace with that. Or at least, I thought I had, until everything changed. It all began when a new department head joined our company. Her name was Mila, and she was 37, just a year younger than me. From the moment she arrived, I was impressed. She had quickly climbed the corporate ladder to become a department head at such a young age, and that was no small feat the first time I saw her. She had this aura of competence and authority that was impossible to ignore. She walked with a certain confidence, and you could tell that she was someone who knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. I admired her drive and her apparent success. However, despite her impressive demeanor, Mila's attitude towards others was less than warm. In fact, she was downright cold. Her first words to me were startlingly harsh. "Are you only a middle school grad? Too dumb, aren't you?" I was taken aback. I had never expected such a direct and cutting remark, especially not from someone who was supposed to be leading the department. I realized she must have looked at my resume, but it baffled me why she would focus on my education from so long ago. The harassment didn't stop there. It seemed like every time I crossed paths with Mila, she had something derogatory to say. She made it a point to remind me repeatedly of my educational background, as if it defined my entire worth as a person and a professional. "Middle school grads are a hindrance to the company. Just disappear," she would say with a sneer. Her words were like daggers, sharp and intended to wound. I tried to remain calm and professional, apologizing even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. But my attempts at diffusing the situation only seemed to encourage her further. Day by day, her insults became more personal and her disdain more palpable. It reached a point where I was no longer allowed to perform my usual duties. "You're not fit for main office work," she told me one day, dismissively waving her hand as if to shoo me away. It didn't matter that I had been successfully doing this job for years. In her eyes, I was unworthy. Was it because of my education? I couldn't help but wonder. It had been so long since I thought about my schooling. I was a middle school graduate, yes, but that was in the past. Since then, I had built a successful career, proving my capabilities through hard work and dedication. My colleagues never made an issue of my educational background, and in today's world, it was rarely even a topic of discussion. Yet, Mila seemed fixated on it, using it as a weapon against me. About a week after she barred me from working, Mila called me into her office. I remember standing outside her door, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to expect, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be good. As I stepped inside, she looked up from her desk, a cold smile playing on her lips. "How does it feel to be unable to work?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock concern. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Work was my passion, my lifeline. Without it, I felt lost, like a ship adrift in the sea with no compass. Did she know that? Did she understand how much programming meant to me? It felt as though she was deliberately trying to strip away everything that gave my life meaning. Her next words were even more devastating. "Being a middle school grad and incompetent, you're unnecessary at headquarters. Choose between being fired or demoted to a remote location." She delivered the ultimatum with a casualness that made my blood boil. It was clear that she saw me as nothing more than an obstacle, something to be discarded. In that moment, I felt a surge of anger and defiance. I had worked too hard and come too far to be treated this way. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice steady as I replied, "Then fire me." At that moment, it finally clicked. I understood exactly what Mila wanted. She wasn't just being difficult for no reason, she had a plan. Her goal was clear, she wanted me out of the company. She wanted me gone, and she was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. That's why she had systematically taken my work away, stripping me of my responsibilities and creating an unwelcoming atmosphere. She made sure I felt out of place, undermined, and isolated. Reflecting on her behavior, I realized that Mila was consistently harsh toward other employees who, like me, were middle school graduates. It was as if she had a vendetta against anyone who didn't meet her standards of educational achievement. We were constantly reminded of our inadequacy and made to feel like imposters just because we worked at headquarters. How much distress and anxiety must everyone have been experiencing under her leadership? I wasn't the only one who had suffered. There were many others who had become victims since Mila's arrival. The once friendly and collaborative atmosphere of the company had deteriorated significantly, replaced by a toxic environment that prioritized educational background above all else. I vividly remember one particular conversation with Mila. She had asked me with a sneer, "Why are there so many middle school grads here?" At the time, I hadn't paid much attention to the educational backgrounds of my colleagues. I never thought it mattered. To me, it was about the work we did, not where we came from. So, when she asked, I could only give a vague response. That's when she scolded me sharply, saying, "It's no surprise you're not aware of it, given your incompetence." Her words stung, but it was her look of disdain that was truly infuriating. Who did she think she was to judge us so harshly? I wondered if she would have dared speak to someone like Michael the same way if she were just a high school dropout. But then, I reminded myself that none of that mattered to her. I wasn't even allowed to do the job that gave me a sense of purpose. If I couldn't contribute meaningfully, then there was no point in staying. Even if they reassigned me to a remote location, Mila would still be my boss, and I absolutely did not want to continue working under someone like her. I was done. I wanted to say, "Thank you for everything, but you don't have to worry about me coming back, ever." That's what I thought should be my parting line. I never wanted to work with someone like her again, let alone follow her orders, regardless of her position. Mila was younger, lacked manners, and there was absolutely nothing about her that I respected. I completed the handover documents that day and left the company for good. The truth is, ever since Mila started harassing me, I had seriously considered changing jobs. I believed that with my years of experience at the company, I could find a position elsewhere. In fact, I had been quietly making progress on this plan behind the scenes. After leaving the office, I had a few places to visit, so I quickly finished my errands and made my way home. As I wrapped up my tasks, a wave of relief washed over me. I felt like a heavy burden had been lifted. Finally, I had said goodbye to that toxic company. But the very next day, I got an unexpected call from Mila. The mere thought of what she could possibly want now filled me with anger. But then I saw this as an opportunity, perhaps my last, to say everything I had been holding back. I decided to take it positively and went to the office to meet her. When I arrived, Mila had a particularly gloomy expression on her face. It was a stark contrast to her usual demeanor. I wondered what could be wrong, but I didn't really want to pry. She thrust the handover documents I had prepared the day before in front of me. Her face was noticeably pale. Even seeing her like that, I felt no concern. "What's wrong? Is there a problem with these documents?" I asked her calmly. Mila seemed flustered. "Do you understand the meaning of all this?" she asked. "Of course, I understand everything. I made them after all. There's no way I wouldn't understand something I created myself," I replied, a bit taken aback by her question. The handover documents were detailed technical guides on the programming work I had developed. They were written in technical terms, but I had made sure they were clear enough for anyone with a programming background to understand. However, it seemed that Mila was struggling. She kept flipping through the pages, her face showing a mix of confusion and frustration. "Is something wrong?" I asked her again. "I don't understand any of this at all. What are these documents?" Mila exclaimed, throwing them down on the desk in frustration. I couldn't believe she treated something someone had worked hard on like that. But she just kept getting angrier. "You did this on purpose to make it incomprehensible for me, didn't you?" she accused. I was stunned. "That's unbelievable. Anyone working with programming should understand it." "I thought you would," I said, still reeling from her reaction. It was at that moment I realized that Mila didn't actually know as much as she let on. She had always acted so superior, and I had assumed she knew everything. But I was wrong. Mila didn't even understand the basic terminology, let alone the intricacies of the work. I felt the anger rising within me again as I sat in front of the computer, staring at the messages on the screen. Just when I thought I was finally free from Mila and ready to start a new chapter in my life, here she was, dragging me back into the chaos I had worked so hard to escape. Her words echoed in my mind, "You made it too complicated, so I had no choice but to call you in." I clenched my fists, my frustration bubbling to the surface. If she didn't understand something, she should have just said so earlier. Instead, she let the situation escalate to the point where she needed to involve me again. I couldn't hold back anymore, and I blurted out what I was really thinking. It was her fault for not knowing, always acting like she was above everyone else. Why should I care if she got upset by my words? This was the problem with people who were too proud. They couldn't admit when they didn't know something and would rather pretend they were infallible. Did Mila even understand what it meant to be a department head? Whether you're a superior or a subordinate, if something is unclear, you should ask for clarification. But Mila, with her inflated sense of self-worth, probably couldn't bring herself to rely on her subordinates. She saw herself as too important, too capable to need help from anyone else. If she didn't want to ask me for assistance, why call me back? There were plenty of other employees she could have approached. Why summon me specifically? It was as if her pride was as insurmountable as Mount Everest, and that wasn't a compliment. She had always been harsh on those around her, making it likely she couldn't bring herself to ask questions. That was why she called me, someone who had already left the company, back into the fold. But there seemed to be another reason too. Your way of speaking sounds so sarcastic, it had to be you. No one else, Mila said, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. Being relied on by Mila in situations like this wasn't exactly flattering. If she was going to depend on me, she should have just asked directly instead of letting me go. Why did it have to be me? I asked her calmly, even though my anger was barely contained. Deep down, I just wanted to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. I wished she would get to the point without all the roundabout excuses. All the employees said they didn't understand the meaning of these documents, Mila explained, sounding desperate. It wasn't just Mila, even the other employees didn't understand what was going on. I was taken aback by this revelation. Apparently, no one else but me could take over this work. Mila must have realized how much she usually looked down on her employees. She never noticed their hard work or the dedication they put into their tasks. To her, the most important thing was someone's educational background. She probably never cared about who was doing what kind of work. As a department head or even as a person, she was completely blind to her surroundings and the contributions of her team. I couldn't keep my frustration in check any longer. So you called me back to this company because only I can understand it? I demanded, my voice rising with every word. Mila slammed her hand on the desk in anger, even though it was her own negligence that had led to this situation. Programming can be learned by adults if they put their mind to it. Some things require years of experience, but the basics should be understandable, I said, my tone sharp. Mila didn't even try to learn on her own and relied entirely on me. It was astonishing how she lashed down on others, yet when she was in a bind, she clung to them for help. Without me, the company's programming would have been completely incapacitated. I began to question whether Mila even knew what my role in the company was. She seemed so self-absorbed that she probably had no idea what I was doing, which was why she had so easily taken my job away using my lack of a formal education as an excuse. I was certain the company had been greatly inconvenienced during that period, likely suffering significant losses, but Mila didn't notice because she didn't understand what my job entailed. I decided to ask her directly, did you know what I was doing in the company? Mila immediately shook her head, confirming my suspicions. I had no interest in what a middle school grad was doing. That's only natural, isn't it? She said, her tone dismissive. Her defiance was incredibly infuriating, but I was no longer associated with this company, and maybe it was time for her to face some hard truths. Mila would be floored if she knew the full extent of what she had overlooked. Suddenly, the situation started to feel almost amusing. It looked like I wouldn't be leaving the company premises anytime soon. I found myself enjoying the thought of confronting Mila with the truth. I was in charge of all the company's programming. This was an undeniable fact. With years of experience, I managed the programming for the company. I was trusted by my peers and had many tasks that only I could handle. That's why I found my work fulfilling and wanted to stay with the company for a long time. But you destroyed all of that. If I'm not needed, I'm the type to back down without any regrets. It's better for everyone if I'm in a place where I'm needed, so I thought there was no longer any value for me here. I had made peace with that decision, and it hasn't changed, I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mila's expression shifted as she listened to me. She looked like she was about to collapse when she heard my story. No way, you. The sheer volume of her voice startled me. It was clear she hadn't been paying any attention to what was happening inside the company. There was a mountain of work that only I could handle, but you didn't notice, did you? I pressed, my words cornering her. Mila nodded firmly. No wonder things went downhill after I joined the team. To think it was all because of you, it's infuriating. Mila always tried to pin the blame on someone else. It wasn't my fault, it was hers for taking my work away. Would any of this have happened if Mila hadn't become the department head in the first place? So you didn't realize how crucial my work was to the company? I asked, still pressing her. She yelled back, you didn't say a word about it. And to think that nobody else knew either. I wondered if she was losing her mind. She probably didn't want to admit she'd done something wrong, especially since she made a mess of things the moment she became department head and caused the company to lose money. I decided to ask around about a few employees who knew a bit about programming, but Mila came out with something outrageous. I thought they were all incompetent dropouts, so I fired them all, she exclaimed. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't help but yell at the sheer awfulness of it. But since she's no longer my boss, there's no need to hold back. Besides, I'm older and have much more experience from my previous job. I don't want to be lectured by a department head who knows nothing about the work I do. Why are you yelling all of a sudden? You're one of my incompetent subordinates, aren't you? She snapped, questioning my attitude. But being yelled at by someone like her doesn't scare or bother me anymore. I just want to talk back to an ignorant and incompetent department head. She should fully realize her own disgrace. She's the least suitable person for this company, and she needs to reflect on the foolish things she's done. However, Mila resisted more than I expected. You've been looking down on me all along, haven't you? You did this on purpose because I wasn't aware of your work, didn't you? She accused, her voice trembling with anger. I shook my head instinctively. There's no benefit in tricking someone like Mila. Besides, I thought I was on top of everything at work, so it's Mila who's at fault. But I didn't get a chance to fight back. Your silence must mean it's true. Ha, you want to put all the blame on me, she accused again, her words cutting through the tension in the room. It's not that I'm silent by choice. Mila has been going on a monologue, completely detached from reality, and I'm left wondering if anything I say will ever make a difference. Mila had a way of speaking that completely dominated every conversation. Her voice would rise above others, cutting through any attempts to engage, leaving no room for anyone else to contribute. It was like she had a wall around her, impervious to anyone's input or feelings. Perhaps this is why so many of her former employees couldn't stand working under her. They felt so stifled and unappreciated that quitting seemed like the only option. I could relate to them. I had been fired by her too, and it was hard not to feel a deep sympathy for anyone else who had suffered at her hands. I was lost in my thoughts, sighing quietly to myself, when Mila stormed back into the room. She seemed to have regained her venom and was ready to launch into another tirade. Her eyes were blazing with a mix of frustration and arrogance. You think you're so important, but you're mistaken, she spat out, her words laced with contempt. I was taken aback by her accusation. How could she think that of me? I had never considered myself to be important in any grand sense. In fact, I had always tried to be humble, believing that it was better to focus on doing good work than to inflate my own ego. Unlike Mila, I didn't see myself as the center of the universe, and I certainly didn't expect others to cater to my whims. I finally managed to find a gap in her tirade to speak. I don't think I'm important at all, Mila, I said firmly, though I doubted my words would penetrate her defenses. As expected, my attempt to reason with her was met with silence. She didn't even acknowledge that I had spoken. It was as if my voice hadn't reached her ears at all. That's when it hit me, this whole situation had spiraled out of control because I had never stood up to her in the beginning. By not speaking up, I had let her continue her reign of terror unchecked, and now I was paying the price. It was a hard truth to swallow. I'm the one who's been living a nightmare because of all this, I muttered under my breath. But to Mila, none of that mattered. She was always quick to point the finger at someone else whenever things didn't go her way. If you had explained the job from the start, I wouldn't have fired you, she shot back, her tone dripping with accusation. I could hardly believe my ears. After everything I had been through, after all the time she had belittled and undermined me, she was now blaming me for her decision to fire me? It was almost laughable if it weren't so infuriating. I felt a wave of anger wash over me, but I tried to keep it in check. It was true that the company's losses were my losses as well, especially since becoming the department head. I had hoped that Mila might eventually recognize my contributions, even just a little. But I was fooling myself. She was only ever interested in what directly benefited her. She let out a long sigh, clearly more concerned with her own misfortunes than anything else. I couldn't help but feel foolish. For even a moment, I had allowed myself to believe that Mila might see the value in my work. But the reality was clear: if my efforts had been of any use to her, she would have kept me around as long as it suited her needs and then discarded me without a second thought. Life doesn't always go the way you hope it will, does it? It seemed like terrible luck that I had become the department head at such a tumultuous time. Mila continued to grumble, now turning her complaints inward. Ever since I became department head, it's been one thing after another. This job is ruining my mental health. And it's all because of you. How are you going to take responsibility for this? She screamed, her voice cracking with frustration. At that moment, she didn't even seem human to me. It was like I was looking at a creature driven purely by selfishness and anger. It was frightening to think that someone like her could rise to such a position of authority. The unpredictability of her temper was unnerving, to say the least. I knew I should hold my tongue, but I couldn't take it anymore. The words burst out of me before I could stop them. Do you have any idea what I've been through as department head? I demanded. My voice shook with a mixture of anger and desperation. Mila seemed unperturbed by my outburst. In her mind, everything she did was justified. She had always been able to manipulate her subordinates into doing what she wanted, and anyone who didn't fit her mold was quickly fired. The company had practically become her personal fiefdom. But now that things weren't going her way, she was quick to find fault everywhere but in herself. As if to underscore her lack of awareness, she suddenly blurted out, "You should just come back to the company. Then everything will work out, right?" I was stunned. After all the bullying and mistreatment, she genuinely thought I would want to return? It was an outrageous suggestion, bordering on the absurd. I couldn't contain my emotions any longer. For the first time in a long while, I found myself shouting from the depths of my heart. "Are you serious? After everything you've done, you expect me to come back? You must be out of your mind." I didn't recognize my own voice. It was raw and filled with an intensity one hadn't realized I was capable of. I had always tried to keep my emotions in check, but Mila had pushed me too far. If I didn't rein myself in, I feared I might turn into someone like her, a person who let anger and bitterness rule their life. Mila looked genuinely surprised, almost as if she hadn't expected me to push back so forcefully. "Why are you screaming? You're scaring me," she exclaimed, though her tone carried more irritation than fear. "The one who's lost their mind is you, not me." I shot back, unable to hide my contempt. I felt a surge of frustration and anger, but at the same time, a strange sense of relief. For once, I was standing up for myself, and it felt liberating. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm not going back to the company, Mila. No matter what you say." She blinked, momentarily taken aback by my resolve. "Why not? I'm telling you, it's okay to come back." "It's not okay, because you're still there," I replied coldly. "And besides, the company doesn't need me anymore. I've moved on." Mila looked incredulous. "I'm saying I'll let you come back, and you're upset with me? What's wrong with you?" She truly didn't understand the gravity of what she had done. It was as if she lived in her own world, where she could do no wrong. "You judged employees solely on their educational background, and you disrupted the harmony within the company," I said, my voice steady. "You fired people without a second thought, just because they didn't fit your narrow criteria. Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused?" She crossed her arms defensively. "I disrupted the company's harmony? That's ridiculous." But I wasn't backing down. "Yes, you did. You fired people unilaterally, people who were still young and had their whole futures ahead of them. You destroyed their chances without a second thought. I can't forgive you for that, Mila. Not now, not ever." She tried to shift the blame again, saying, "I thought you were fired because you misunderstood the meaning of programming. That's all." There she was, twisting the narrative again to suit her own ends. "You're bringing that up again?" I demanded. "I'm done with your games. Words can't be taken back, nor can the hurt they cause. Have you even once tried to understand how I felt?" Mila's face hardened. "There's no way I could understand that," she admitted, her voice flat and emotionless. She had no remorse, no empathy. It was like talking to a brick wall. I realized then that there was no point in continuing this conversation. It was time for the final blow. "I've already secured a job at a major corporation," I announced, my voice steady and confident. At the mention of the company's name, Mila's face went pale. "When did you manage to get into such a big company?" she stammered, her bravado faltering for the first time. I couldn't help but smile. "Ever since you started harassing me, I've been looking for other opportunities. I've visited this corporation several times, and they were impressed with my years of programming experience. They happily offered me a position, and they're even willing to wait until I leave here. It's a company at the forefront of programming in Japan, and I'm confident I can advance my career there." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I've successfully secured a job, so I have no more business here," I added coldly. Mila's expression shifted from shock to fury. How can someone like you, a middle school grad, get a job at such a big company? She spat, her voice trembling with anger. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I thought we weren't using the phrase middle school grad anymore. You really are incompetent, aren't you? Incompetent, she repeated, almost as if she couldn't believe her ears. I nodded. Yes, incompetent. You don't try to understand your employees at all, which makes you a terrible department head. You're dragging the